The night was quiet, almost too quiet for the small town that slept beneath a cloudy sky. Streetlights flickered weakly, and far beyond the edge of the city, a junkyard stretched like a forgotten graveyard of machines. Old cars, broken buses, twisted steel, and rusted memories lay scattered everywhere. It was the kind of place people only visited when they needed spare parts or a hiding spot. But that night, something extraordinary happened in that lonely place. Something that no one on Earth was ready to understand. Above the clouds, a dim blue light moved silently. It wasn't an airplane or a meteor. It was something far older, something that had crossed endless stars and galaxies. The object looked like a giant piece of metal, worn and cracked, floating helplessly as if it had been fighting for years. Its once bright symbols were now faded, and the hum that kept it alive had almost gone silent. Inside it, systems blinked weakly, the last signs of a machine that had seen too much. This wasn't just any spacecraft. It belonged to a civilization that humans could not even imagine, one that had traveled through time and space for thousands of years. But now that civilization had moved on. They built better ships, faster and smarter ones. The old models like this one were useless to them, abandoned like outdated tools. And so this broken vessel was thrown away, sent to a faraway planet no one cared to visit. That planet was Earth. The ship fell silently through the atmosphere like a dying star hiding its final light. When it hit the ground, it didn't explode or burn. It simply sank deep into the piles of junk, hidden between scrap metal, old engines, and discarded dreams. The night sky returned to normal, and the world slept peacefully, unaware that something alien had just landed in their backyard. Days passed. The junkyard owner noticed nothing. Trucks came and went, bringing new piles of garbage, and the strange metallic shape was buried deeper under layers of broken things. It looked like nothing special, just another chunk of old metal. No one had a reason to look twice, but fate always has its quiet ways of connecting the right soul to the right mystery. One afternoon, a man walked through the junkyard with a metal detector in one hand and a wrench in the other. His clothes were covered in grease and his eyes were sharp, always searching for something valuable among the waste. He wasn't rich, but he had magic in his hands. Anything broken, cars, bikes, radios, he could bring back to life. That was his gift, and it was the only thing keeping his small repair workshop alive. He spent most of his days fixing old engines and selling repaired tools. His life was simple, maybe too quiet, but he never complained. He found peace in the sound of machines coming back to life. The clicks, the hums, the soft vibrations when an engine finally responded after days of work. That sound made him feel alive, as if he had done something meaningful in a world that didn't care much about small people like him. That day, while searching through a pile of car frames, his metal detector beeped loudly. He stopped and kicked away the dust. Something underneath caught his attention. It was huge, a curved surface of silver metal buried in the dirt. Unlike everything else around, this metal didn't rust. It shimmered faintly even under the weak sunlight. He ran his hand across it and felt something strange, a vibration almost like a heartbeat. "What is this thing?" he murmured to himself. He knocked on the surface with his wrench. It echoed back, not like hollow steel, but like something alive deep inside. Curiosity sparked in his eyes. He had found many strange machines in this junkyard, but nothing like this. He decided to dig around it. After hours of effort, the shape began to reveal itself, smooth, curved lines that didn't match any design he had ever seen. It looked like part of a giant pod or an aircraft, but different. Too advanced, he couldn't resist. He tied the object to his small loader and slowly pulled it toward his workshop nearby. The whole way it made faint noises like whispers under the metal. It almost felt like it was reacting to being moved, but he didn't think much of it. To him, it was probably an old prototype from some factory, maybe military scrap that someone threw away. If he could fix it or sell its metal, it might pay his bills for a few months. Back in his workshop, he cleaned off the dirt and began examining it. The closer he looked, the more confused he became. The material was unlike anything he had seen, light but incredibly strong. When he tried to cut a small piece, his blade broke. Even more surprising, the surface slowly healed itself as if it didn't want to be damaged. He stepped back, amazed and a little uneasy. Over the next few nights, he couldn't stop thinking about that object. Every time he entered his workshop, he found the air slightly warmer near it. Sometimes he thought he saw a faint glow under the surface, like soft blue veins running through metal. One night he turned off all the lights and stood there quietly watching. The glow became clearer, forming strange symbols that moved like water. He didn't understand what they meant, but he could feel something. Not fear exactly, but presence. It was as if someone or something inside that metal wanted to communicate. He laughed nervously. Am I going crazy? It's just a machine, he told himself. Yet deep down he didn't believe that. Machines didn't breathe light. Machines didn't pulse like living things. But this one did. He decided to study it more seriously. Using his tools, he opened small sections carefully, checking the inner parts. Instead of wires and bolts, he found structures that looked almost organic, like veins or circuits that grew naturally. The technology was far beyond anything on Earth, yet somehow familiar in its design. Like it was built with care, not mass production. Every part seemed connected as if it had purpose and memory. On the fifth night, while he was cleaning the interior with a flashlight, something unbelievable happened. The entire surface of the object flickered to life. Lights spread out like flowing energy. He stepped back, eyes wide. A soft hum filled the room, gentle yet powerful. Then he heard a faint sound, not quite a voice, but a vibration that formed into a pattern. It wasn't speaking in words, but it was trying to reach him. He froze, holding his breath. The energy pulsed again, and he suddenly felt warmth spreading through his hands. For a moment, he thought he heard a whisper in his head, a feeling of loneliness, of being lost. It wasn't human, yet it was so deeply emotional that his eyes watered without knowing why. This machine, whatever it was, wasn't just a machine. It was alive, broken, and asking for help. He sat down on the floor, shaking slightly. You're alive, aren't you? He whispered. The humming grew stronger, as if it understood him. He didn't know how, but he could feel its response. It wasn't words, and it was emotion. It was gratitude mixed with pain. That night he couldn't sleep. He sat there for hours, staring at the glowing lines, wondering how something not from this world could feel so human. By morning the glow had faded again, and the junkyard looked normal, but nothing was the same for him anymore. He knew he couldn't ignore it. He decided to help it no matter what it was. He didn't know where it came from or what it wanted, but he understood one thing clearly. It was broken and left behind, just like so many things in his junkyard. And if there was one thing he knew how to do, it was fix what others had given up on. He spent the next day gathering old machine parts, wires, and tools. He carefully set up power connections, hoping to find a way to recharge whatever energy source this thing used. For hours he worked without stopping, trying to connect Earth's crude technology to something far beyond it. Most of his attempts failed. Sparks flew, breakers tripped, and he nearly got shocked more than once, but he didn't stop. His hands were blistered, his clothes soaked in sweat, but he felt a strange determination burning inside him. He wanted to see it wake up again, not for money, not for fame, but because it felt right. Late that evening, just as he was about to give up, a soft light appeared once more. The ship's hum returned, stronger this time. The symbols on its body began to shift faster, like it was rebooting. Then a faint sound echoed in the room, like a sigh of relief. He stood there staring, realizing what he had done. He had brought something back to life, not a car, not a machine, but something that had traveled through stars. He smiled quietly. You're still here, he whispered. The hum grew steady, like a heartbeat syncing with his own. That night, under the dim light of his workshop, a strange friendship began, between a human who fixed broken things and a ship that had been abandoned by its creators. Neither of them spoke, but somehow they understood each other perfectly. Both had been left behind, both forgotten, yet both still capable of coming back to life. And in that silence, surrounded by metal and moonlight, the story of something extraordinary quietly began, a story that would soon change both of their lives forever. The next few mornings felt different for the mechanic. Every time he opened the workshop door, he could feel the air shift slightly. Warmer, lighter, almost alive. The strange machine sat quietly in the corner, half covered in a tarp, but it seemed to hum faintly whenever he entered, as if greeting him. He couldn't explain it, but there was a silent understanding between them now, something deeper than logic. He started his day the usual way, fixing small engines for customers, repairing broken machines, and running to the junkyard for spare parts. But even as he worked, His thoughts kept wandering back to the strange metal object he had found. There was something about it that called to him, not in a loud way, but gently like a heartbeat in the background of his mind. When night came, and the town fell silent again, he would pull off the tarp and study it. The light beneath its surface appeared whenever he touched it, pulsing slowly. Sometimes when he leaned closer, he thought he could hear faint sounds, not quite words, but tones that carried emotion. It wasn't frightening anymore. It was peaceful, like a lost being trying to speak after a long silence. He started keeping a notebook on his workbench. He wrote down every pattern he saw, how the lights flickered, how the surface reacted when he connected different power sources, how the hum grew stronger when he used copper instead of aluminum. It became his nightly ritual. He would work until his eyes hurt, then fall asleep on the chair beside the ship listening to its soft rhythm. One night, while he was studying a section near the front, the glow spread further than ever before. Lines of light traveled like veins across the entire surface. The symbols shifted rapidly and a small opening appeared, a panel he hadn't noticed before. He froze, afraid he might have triggered something dangerous. But the ship remained calm, as if inviting him to look. He took a step forward and carefully peered inside. The interior wasn't made of wires and pipes like human machines. It was smooth and alive-looking, with streams of light moving through transparent layers like glowing roots of a tree. The colors changed with every sound he made, blue when he whispered, green when he moved closer. He reached out and gently placed his hand on the inner wall. The moment his skin touched the surface, his mind filled with flashes, not images exactly, but feelings. A deep sadness, then loneliness, then the faint memory of a vast dark sky. His body trembled and he pulled his hand back, gasping. The lights dimmed instantly, as if apologizing for overwhelming him. He sat on the floor, breathing heavily, trying to make sense of what he had just felt. He realized then that this machine wasn't just built to travel. It carried memories. It had seen things far beyond anything humans could imagine. Stars, planets, endless silence, and then abandonment. Somehow those emotions were still alive inside it. It was trying to share them with him, maybe to explain, maybe to ask for help. From that night onward, his approach changed. He no longer saw it as a strange object to study or fix. He saw it as something alive, something that had suffered. He began talking to it while he worked, even though he didn't know if it understood. "You must have come from far away," he would say softly, adjusting his tools. "But don't worry. You're safe here. I'll help you." To his surprise, the lights always reacted when he spoke gently. When he was calm, they glowed brighter. When he was tired or upset, they dimmed. It was as if the ship could feel his emotions too. This silent connection grew stronger each day, until it felt like he was no longer working alone. A few days later, while repairing an old motorbike, he had an idea. What if the ship could draw energy from natural sources instead of just electricity? He had noticed it responded differently when sunlight hit its surface. So he decided to build a small solar circuit around it, connecting old panels he found in the junkyard. It took him 3 days to set everything up, working from morning till night, eating little, barely resting. When he finally connected the last wire, he stepped back and waited. For a few moments, nothing happened. Then slowly, a warm glow spread across the entire structure. The hum deepened, steady and alive, almost like breathing. The whole workshop filled with light so soft and beautiful that it felt like standing inside a dream. He smiled, his heart pounding. "You like sunlight, don't you?" he whispered. The light flickered twice, almost like a nod. He laughed quietly, feeling a strange joy he hadn't felt in years. For so long, his life had been just work and silence. Now, for the first time, he felt like he wasn't alone. Days turned into weeks. The ship began responding faster. The symbols changed more often. The hum grew smoother, and sometimes the lights formed shapes that looked almost like faces or clouds. He didn't understand the language, but he didn't need to. He could feel its emotions clearly: curiosity, gratitude, calmness. It was as if two beings from different worlds were slowly learning to understand each other without words. One evening, as he was cleaning his tools, a sudden flash appeared in front of him, a faint projection of light floating in midair. He froze, staring in disbelief. The light twisted gently until it formed a shape. Not a perfect image, but something resembling a being, tall and translucent, with kind eyes made of soft blue light. He stepped closer, afraid to breathe. The figure tilted its head slightly, observing him. Then it raised a hand, glowing faintly, and touched its own chest. A sound followed. A soft tone, repeating itself slowly, almost like a name. He pointed at himself and said quietly, "I'm E." Then he pointed at the projection. "You?" The light pulsed again, repeating the same tone, slower this time, as if confirming. He smiled nervously. "So that's your name, huh?" The figure shimmered, the light around it softening, almost as if it was smiling back. For the next few nights they communicated through sound and gestures. The projection couldn't speak human language, but it could respond to tone, rhythm, and touch. Sometimes it would project star maps in the air, countless dots of light connected by moving lines. He would watch in awe, realizing those weren't just stars. They were memories. Each map represented a journey the ship had once taken. He began to understand its story piece by piece. It had been part of a fleet, a great collection of ships traveling through galaxies. When it became outdated and damaged, its creators left it behind, disposing of it like an old tool. It had drifted alone for years before falling into Earth's atmosphere. That's where he found it, in a pile of trash, waiting for someone to notice it again. The realization made his heart heavy. He could see himself in that story. He too had been left behind in many ways, man, by people, by luck, by time. But he had always kept going, fixing what others threw away. Maybe that was why he had found the ship. Maybe both of them were meant to help each other heal. Each night he repaired more of its internal systems. Sometimes he failed. Sometimes he succeeded. But the ship never grew impatient. It waited quietly, responding gently whenever he touched its surface. There were nights when he fell asleep beside it, exhausted, and when he woke up, the workshop would be softly lit, as if the ship had watched over him through the night. One early morning, while adjusting a new energy circuit, he noticed something new. The projection was no longer faint. It stood clearer than ever, glowing with strength. It reached out again, and this time a small pulse of light touched his hand. It didn't burn. Instead, it felt warm, comforting. For a moment, he felt everything. The silence of deep space, the sound of stars moving, the cold loneliness of being forgotten. And then, peace. He opened his eyes, and the projection slowly faded. The ship's hum grew soft again, steady and calm. He stood there for a long time, overwhelmed but grateful. He understood now. The ship wasn't just trying to repair itself. It was trying to remember who it was, and maybe, through him, it was learning what it meant to be alive again. That night, as he sat beside the ship, eating his simple dinner, he smiled and said softly, "You know, maybe we're both not so different. You were thrown away, I was forgotten. But look at us now. We're still here." The light flickered gently in response, like a quiet laugh. He leaned back on his chair, listening to the soft hum filling the room. Outside, the world slept, unaware that something extraordinary was happening. In a small workshop on the edge of town, a friendship forming between a human who fixed broken things and a ship from another world that had been waiting too long to be found. And for the first time in years, the mechanic felt truly alive, not because of his work, but because he had found something that made him believe that even in the loneliest corners of the universe, nothing is ever too broken to be fixed. The days slowly turned into weeks, and the strange bond between the mechanic and the ship grew stronger with each passing night. His workshop, once filled with the sound of clattering tools and the smell of grease, had now become something different, a place that felt alive. The faint hum of the ship blended with the quiet rhythm of his own heartbeat. It was as if the two shared a secret that no one else in the world could ever understand. Every morning, before opening his small shop for customers, he would check the ship first. Sometimes he just placed his hand on its surface and the lights would softly blink in response. It was a simple greeting, but it made him smile. It reminded him that there was something magical hiding beneath all that metal. The town around him continued as usual. People came and went. Cars broke down. Kids played near the fences, and no one had the slightest idea that something from another world was lying inside his workshop. He preferred it that way. He didn't want anyone asking questions or trying to take it away. He had seen enough in life to know how quickly people could destroy what they didn't understand. At night, after closing his shop, he would sit beside the ship, talking to it like an old friend. "You know," he would say quietly, wiping the oil from his hands, I still don't know why you ended up here. Maybe it wasn't an accident. Maybe you came because you needed someone who still believes broken things can work again. The lights would glow faintly, as if answering. He'd like to imagine it was listening. Maybe it even understood. One night, while repairing the ship's lower side, he noticed a strange marking glowing under the surface. It wasn't like the other symbols. This one looked different, like a circle made of smaller dots that moved slowly in a pattern. He tried sketching it down in his notebook. As he touched it again, the marking brightened and the hum grew deeper. The entire workshop vibrated softly and a small beam of light appeared above the ship, forming another holographic image. It wasn't the same as before. This time it wasn't a figure, it was a place. He saw flashes of mountains made of crystal, skies that shimmered with silver clouds, and cities floating above oceans of light. He couldn't breathe for a moment. The vision was so real that he could almost feel the wind from that other world. Then the image faded, leaving him in silence once more. He sat on the floor, staring at the spot where it had appeared. For the first time, he realized something. This ship was showing him its memories, maybe even its home. It wasn't just thanking him. It was trusting him. He whispered softly, "That's where you came from, isn't it?" The light pulsed gently as if saying yes. He leaned back against the wall, lost in thought. For years he had lived a simple, almost lonely life, fixing things that no one cared about. But now, for the first time, he felt part of something bigger, something that stretched beyond Earth, beyond human understanding. He didn't know if it was destiny or coincidence, but he felt grateful that fate had chosen him. The next morning, as sunlight poured through the dusty windows, he found the ship's glow stronger than ever. It seemed to be charging itself naturally, drawing energy from the light. He smiled, realizing that maybe it didn't need his electrical circuits anymore. Maybe it was learning to heal itself. Over the next few days, he noticed more changes. The once dull metal surface began to regain its shine, like new skin forming over an old wound. Small vents opened and closed smoothly, and faint sounds echoed from within, mechanical but rhythmic like breathing. It was alive again, truly alive. But one thing still bothered him. Every night the ship made a low, sorrowful sound before going completely silent for a few minutes. It reminded him of someone sighing in their sleep. He didn't know what caused it, but he could feel the sadness in that sound. Maybe it missed its home. Maybe it was remembering something painful. One evening he sat near it, listening carefully as the hum grew quiet again. "You know," he said softly, "I think I understand how you feel. Being alone, being left behind. It hurts, doesn't it?" His voice trembled slightly as he spoke. "I've been there too. You give your best, you do everything right, but still, people walk away. They forget you like you never existed." For a long moment there was silence. Then slowly the light on the ship brightened again, glowing warmly, almost as if comforting him. It wasn't a voice, but he could feel the emotion behind it. Understanding, empathy, and connection. He closed his eyes, letting out a shaky breath. For the first time in years, he didn't feel so alone. As days passed, he continued fixing small parts, carefully studying how the ship responded. He had learned its patterns now, how it drew energy, how it repaired itself, and how it communicated through light and sound. He was becoming more than just a mechanic. He was its caretaker, its translator, maybe even its friend. One afternoon, while cleaning around the workshop, he accidentally dropped one of his old wrenches near the ship. The moment it hit the ground, the lights flickered and the ship made a sharp, high-pitched tone. Startled, he picked up the wrench. "Hey, it's okay. Just a mistake," he said quickly, his voice calm. The light steadied again, slowly fading back to its soft rhythm. He realized something important that day. The ship was protective, maybe even afraid. Whatever it had been through before reaching Earth must have left scars, not just on its body but deep within its system. He didn't push it after that. He worked slowly, talking softly, letting it know he meant no harm. At night, when the wind outside howled through the junkyard, he would stay awake, listening to the hum. Sometimes it changed tone, almost like music. Other times he thought he could hear faint echoes, sounds that didn't belong to Earth. It was like the ship was dreaming of the stars. A few weeks later, something unexpected happened. He woke up one night to the sound of a deep vibration shaking the ground. The entire workshop glowed as if sunlight had poured through the roof. The ship was active again, brighter than ever before. He rushed to it, shielding his eyes from the light. "Hey, what's happening?" he shouted over the noise. The light swirled around him, wrapping him in a soft blue glow. Then, just like before, a holographic image appeared, this time clearer than ever. It showed a fleet of ships flying through endless darkness. One by one, the ships disappeared, leaving only one behind, this very one. Then the image shifted, showing it crashing through a storm, falling through clouds, and landing on Earth. He understood now. It wasn't just left behind. It was escaping. It had survived something terrible, maybe a battle, maybe destruction, and had been hiding ever since. The projection faded, and the ship's lights dimmed again. The hum slowed, weak and tired. He placed his hand on the surface. "You're safe now," he said quietly. "You don't have to run anymore." The light blinked softly, a faint flicker of comfort. From that night, he took extra care of it. He stayed close, checking its systems, making sure the energy flow stayed stable. He knew it wasn't just a machine, and it was a survivor. And deep inside, he felt proud that he could help it heal. One evening, he was sitting outside the workshop watching the sunset when he noticed something surprising. The faint light from the ship reflected off the window, glowing softly even through the walls. It was like it wanted to be seen, not hidden anymore. He smiled to himself. "You're not afraid of being found anymore, are you?" The light pulsed faintly from inside, like a gentle heartbeat answering his words. He realized something that night. Both he and the ship had changed. When he first found it, he had been tired of life, tired of being unseen. But now he had a purpose. Fixing the ship had somehow fixed him too. Every small sound, every flicker of light, every hum reminded him that he mattered. Not just as a mechanic, but as someone capable of understanding something beyond this world. As he turned off the lights and prepared to sleep, he looked at the ship one last time and whispered, "You know, maybe we saved each other." The glow softened, warm and peaceful, filling the room with a calm light. That night he dreamed for the first time in years. He dreamed of stars, billions of them, shining above a quiet world. In that dream he wasn't alone, and neither was the ship. They were both moving forward together, not as a man and a machine, but as two beings who had found hope in the unlikeliest of places, a forgotten junkyard at the edge of Earth. He didn't sleep much after that night. The image of that glowing structure and the faint voice echoing in his head wouldn't let him rest. Every time he closed his eyes, he could see the lights flickering and hear that soft hum calling him back. It wasn't fear that kept him awake. It was curiosity mixed with something deeper, like empathy. The mechanic had always been drawn to broken things, not because they were valuable, but because fixing them made him feel alive. The next morning, he went straight to the workshop and stood in front of the strange metal structure. Sunlight slipped through the open roof and landed on its surface, making the dull silver shimmer faintly. He touched it again. It felt warm, almost like skin instead of metal. He whispered to himself, "You're not just a machine, are you?" Days passed, and he began to treat it like one of his regular projects. He examined every edge and corner, using his old tools, checking where the panels were loose, where the circuits were damaged. There were patterns of light that seemed to respond to his presence, like it could sense his movements. Whenever he connected two wires or cleaned off the rust-like coating, a soft glow appeared, spreading across the surface like veins waking up. At first he thought it was reacting randomly, but one night while he was adjusting a cluster of cables, the glow pulsed 3 times and then faded. He did it again, and it repeated. That was the moment he realized it was responding intelligently. It was aware. It was communicating. He began to talk to it while he worked, even though there was no reply he could clearly understand. He would say things like, "You've been out there, haven't you?" Or, "I bet you've seen things none of us could imagine." It became a habit. Maybe he talked to it because he was lonely, or maybe because he felt it needed to hear a human voice. Whatever the reason, it made the workshop feel alive. One evening, a storm hit the town. The mechanic decided to stay at the workshop since the roads were flooded. As thunder rolled outside, he sat beside the strange structure, watching the rain slide down the windows. Suddenly, the lights on the metal surface grew brighter, and a small flicker of energy projected into the air above it. At first it was just a blur, like smoke twisting into shapes. Then slowly it began to form a faint figure. It wasn't human. It was translucent and shimmering, shaped more by light than matter. The mechanic froze, unsure if he was dreaming. The figure spoke, Not in words, but through waves of emotion that somehow translated into meaning inside his head. It didn't use sound. It used feeling. He understood fragments like distant echoes. The being told him it was a ship once used for exploration across galaxies. It had carried life, data, and stories from distant worlds. But as newer ships were built, faster, stronger, smarter, this one was deemed obsolete. Its creators abandoned it on a route near Earth, leaving it to drift. Eventually, it entered the planet's atmosphere and fell, landing unnoticed among human waste. The mechanic listened, barely breathing. The voice wasn't bitter, just tired. It spoke of journeys through stars, of carrying life forms, and then being discarded when it wasn't useful anymore. He didn't know what to say, so he just nodded slowly and whispered, "I know how that feels." That made the light pulse softly, as if it understood him too. He shared his own story in return, how his little workshop barely survived after the bigger companies opened across town, how people stopped bringing their machines to him, choosing faster, cheaper services instead. He didn't belong anywhere anymore, just a man surrounded by forgotten metal. The alien ship and he, in a strange way, were the same. From that night on, they began a silent partnership. Every day he worked to repair its inner systems. He scavenged the junkyard for wires, energy cells, and fragments of old engines. Sometimes he even dismantled his own tools to rebuild parts of the ship. He didn't know if it could ever fly again, but fixing it became his purpose. The ship seemed to respond more quickly now. When he connected the circuits right, soft patterns would ripple across its surface like waves of light. It even began to help him. Once, when he accidentally dropped his wrench, a faint magnetic pull lifted it slightly toward his hand. He looked around, smiling. "So you can lend a hand," he joked. He started to notice something else, too. Whenever he worked near it, the air around the workshop felt different, lighter, almost calm. His headaches, which he used to get often from stress, disappeared. Sometimes when he was tired, he would rest his hand on the ship, and a soothing warmth spread through him, giving him energy again. It was as if the ship was healing him while he was healing it. But the process wasn't easy. There were moments of failure. Some nights the lights went out completely, and he feared he had broken it beyond repair. He'd sit there in silence, staring at the motionless structure, wondering if he was foolish for trying. Yet each time he wanted to give up, the ship would flicker faintly, almost like it was telling him not to quit. He grew protective of it. When people visited his shop, he covered it with tarps and pretended it was an unfinished project. He didn't want anyone asking questions or reporting it. To him, it wasn't just a discovery. It was a bond that didn't need explaining. One afternoon, as he was adjusting a panel inside, a sudden surge of light filled the room. The holographic figure appeared again, brighter this time, clearer. He could see details in its form, movements that looked like breathing. It said something that felt like gratitude. Not with words, but through a wave of emotion so strong that it made his chest ache. He stood there quietly, smiling to himself. "You're welcome," he said softly, not even sure if it could understand the words. As days passed, the ship regained more of its old strength. The once silent structure now hummed like a living heart. The lights glowed rhythmically, and small mechanical parts moved as if they were stretching after a long sleep. The mechanic began to feel like he wasn't just repairing a machine. He was reviving a friend. Sometimes when he walked outside at night, he'd look up at the stars and imagine the places the ship had seen. He wondered about the beings who built it. Did they know what they had lost? Did they care? He thought about how easily people discarded what they no longer needed, both in his world and beyond it. One night, while cleaning a corner panel, he found strange markings carved into the inner surface, symbols glowing faintly blue. They weren't letters, but they carried meaning, something ancient and familiar. The ship projected a small image showing distant planets, each one fading slowly like memories. The mechanic realized it was showing him its past, a goodbye to the worlds it had once known. He whispered, "You're not alone anymore. You're home now." The lights responded with a warm golden hue that filled the whole workshop. The rain had stopped outside, and the world was silent except for the soft hum of the ship. It wasn't just a piece of technology anymore, it had become something deeper. The mechanic didn't know what would happen next or if the ship could ever fly again. But one thing was certain. Both of them had found something they didn't know they were missing. A reason to exist. That night, as he switched off the workshop lights, the ship glowed softly in the dark, almost like it was breathing beside him. And for the first time in a long time, he felt peace. The night it came back to life was something the mechanic would never forget. It began like any other evening. The workshop smelled of oil and metal, the air filled with the soft buzz of tools. He was sitting on a small stool, hands covered in grease, staring at the large metallic structure that had become the center of his world. It had been months of endless effort, trial after trial, failure after failure, but tonight felt different. The hum beneath the metal was steady, stronger than before, like the heartbeat of something awakening after a long sleep. He took a deep breath and connected the last circuit wire he had rebuilt from old engine parts. Sparks flickered for a moment, and then the lights on the ship's surface began to pulse slowly, rhythmically, like breathing. The glow spread across every curve and edge of its body, illuminating the entire workshop in a warm golden light. The mechanic stepped back, covering his eyes, his heart pounding. He had seen the lights before, but never this bright, never this alive. A low vibration filled the ground beneath his feet, and the air around him felt charged, like standing near a thunderstorm. The ship's panels began to shift and realign themselves. Parts that had been broken or bent started straightening, smoothing out, reshaping as though the metal remembered what it was meant to be. He watched, stunned, as the machine rebuilt itself before his eyes. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. Months of patience, sweat, and sleepless nights had finally led to this moment. It wasn't just a machine anymore, it was alive. He reached out to touch it, and for the first time the ship responded. The metal was warm, almost like skin, and as his hand brushed over it, the lights changed color, from gold to soft blue, then white. It felt like it was saying thank you. Tears filled his eyes. He hadn't cried in years, but this was different. This wasn't just pride, it was connection. He had brought something back to life, something that had been forgotten by its own kind. Suddenly the air shimmered, and that familiar figure appeared again. The faint holographic image that looked like a being made of light. It was clearer now, its shape more stable. Its presence filled the room with warmth and calm. The mechanic stood still, afraid that any movement might break the moment. The figure tilted its head as though looking at him, and even though no words were spoken, he could feel what it was saying, a feeling of deep gratitude and peace. He smiled softly and said, "You're back." The lights around the workshop flickered gently, as if the ship understood. Over the next few hours, the two of them shared a silent celebration. The ship's hum grew stronger, vibrating through the entire junkyard. Tools and loose bolts rattled on the shelves, and the floor trembled slightly. Outside, a few birds took off from nearby trees, startled by the low sound that seemed to rise from the earth itself. The mechanic quickly ran outside to make sure no one was around. The glow was so bright it could probably be seen from a distance. He didn't want curious eyes or rumors spreading. This was their moment. Private, sacred. When he came back inside, the ship's form was still changing, though more gently now. Its once dull, scarred surface had turned sleek and almost mirror-like. He could see his own reflection in it, small and tired but smiling. After a few minutes, a soft wind began to swirl through the workshop, even though the doors were closed. Dust lifted from the floor, tools rattled again, and suddenly the ship began to rise, just a few feet off the ground. The mechanic stumbled back, his mouth open in awe. It hovered there silently, weightless, glowing brighter than ever. The figure of light appeared once more, now floating beside him. Its glow cast shadows across the walls. The mechanic could feel something in his chest, not fear, not excitement, but a mix of both. The being reached out its hand, though it wasn't solid, and a gentle warmth wrapped around him like a soft breeze. He felt emotions rushing through him that weren't his own: joy, relief, freedom. The ship had been lost for so long, abandoned, forgotten, but now it was alive again, complete. The mechanic whispered, "You can leave now, can't you?" For a few seconds everything went silent. Then the ship's glow dimmed slightly, almost as if it were thinking. Slowly it lifted higher, the entire workshop shaking as small pieces of metal rolled across the floor. The ceiling lights flickered from the energy in the air. He stepped outside, heart beating wildly, and watched as the roof glowed with the reflection of the ship's light. Then, with a sudden surge, it rose into the night sky. It climbed higher and higher, the golden light spreading across the dark clouds. The sound it made was soft, more like music than noise, a deep, humming melody that vibrated through the ground. He shielded his eyes, watching as it disappeared into the clouds. He stood there in the open yard, his hair blowing in the cold night air, his chest aching with both pride and sadness. He wanted to believe it would return someday. He whispered softly, "Goodbye, my friend." But just as he turned back toward his workshop, something unexpected happened. A bright streak shot across the sky and the ship descended again, slowly, silently. It hovered for a moment just above the junkyard, then lowered itself back to where it had been. The lights dimmed until only a soft glow remained. The mechanic stood there in disbelief. It had come back. He stepped closer, reaching out his hand. The metal was still warm. The figure appeared one last time, faint and flickering. It didn't need to speak. He understood. The ship had chosen to stay. It didn't want to go back to the stars, to the ones who had discarded it. It wanted to remain here, with the one who had given it life again. The mechanic felt his throat tighten. He smiled, though his eyes glistened. "You're home," he said softly. From that night on, the ship remained in the junkyard, hidden under a large steel shed he built around it. To everyone else, it was just another piece of old machinery, but to him it was a companion. Quiet, loyal, alive. He still worked every day, fixing cars and machines, helping people who came to him. But every night before locking up, he would visit the ship. He'd place his hand on its surface and feel that familiar warmth, that steady hum that sounded almost like breathing. Sometimes, when he was tired or frustrated, he'd sit beside it, talking softly. "Do you think your people ever miss you?" he'd ask. "Do they ever wonder where you went?" The lights would flicker gently in response, like laughter, or maybe reassurance. It wasn't long before people in town began to whisper about strange lights coming from the junkyard at night. Some said they saw the sky glow faintly blue. Others claimed they heard soft humming sounds in the wind. But the mechanic never confirmed or denied anything. He just smiled when asked and said he worked late. He didn't need to explain. Some things were too magical to share. Sometimes he'd walk outside and look at the stars, wondering how many secrets they held, how many forgotten machines drifted out there, waiting for someone to care enough to fix them. The ship had changed him. It had reminded him that everything, no matter how broken or forgotten, could find purpose again. And though it could have flown across galaxies, it stayed on Earth, choosing peace over the cold emptiness of space. In that quiet junkyard, surrounded by rusted metal and forgotten things, two lives, one human, one not, had found each other. One had given life and the other had given meaning. As the nights went by, the town would fall silent, but from the mechanic's workshop a faint, rhythmic hum could always be heard, like a soft song shared between two old friends who no longer needed words to understand each other. Years passed quietly after that night when the ship chose to stay. Life in the small town went on as usual, people fixing their cars, kids playing in the streets, and the world slowly changing with time. But in the corner of that old junkyard, behind rusted fences and piles of metal, something extraordinary remained hidden from everyone's eyes. The mechanic still worked there every single day, just as he always had. His workshop was small, dusty, and filled with the familiar smell of oil, but it had something no one else did, a secret that gave it life. Every morning he'd start his day with a cup of coffee, sitting on the same stool near the strange structure that once came from the stars. The ship had become part of his daily life now. It didn't move much anymore, didn't light up as often, but it still hummed faintly like a heartbeat. Sometimes that soft vibration was the only sound in the quiet workshop. It was a reminder that even though it came from somewhere far beyond Earth, it had chosen to stay right there with him. The mechanic wasn't the same man he once was. The years had slowed him down. His hair had turned gray, and his hands trembled a little when he worked, but his eyes still carried that same spark, the same curiosity that once made him drag a strange piece of metal home from the junkyard. Every time he looked at the ship, he saw not a machine, but a friend, a silent companion that had watched him grow older, fix countless broken things, and face the world one small job at a time. Sometimes he talked to it just as he always did. "You know," he would say while polishing its side, "people out there think this is just a pile of scrap metal. If only they knew what you really are." The ship would answer in its own quiet way, a faint glow under his hand, a soft hum through the floor, a gentle flicker of light like a smile. He'd laugh and shake his head. Yeah, I know. It's better that they don't. The town had changed a lot. New shops opened, old ones closed. The junkyard had become smaller over time, with fewer people bringing things in. Some even said it should be cleared out to make space for a new warehouse. But the mechanic never let anyone near the far corner where the ship rested. He told everyone that part of the yard was unsafe, full of dangerous materials. It wasn't a complete lie. He just wanted to protect the only thing that truly mattered to him. One winter evening, when the air was cold and heavy with fog, a group of children wandered near the junkyard fence. They were curious about the strange stories that had spread over the years, about lights glowing at night and humming sounds that came from nowhere. They tried peeking through the fence, but all they saw were shadows of old cars and rusted machines. The mechanic noticed them and smiled from a distance. He didn't chase them away. He knew the feeling of curiosity. He had lived his entire life because of it. That night, after the children left, he sat beside the ship and spoke softly. You remember when they said they'd tear this place down? I think they might someday. And when that happens, I don't know what'll become of us. For a moment, the ship stayed silent. Then, slowly, faint lights began to move across its surface. Soft golden lines that formed shapes he couldn't understand, but somehow felt comforting. It was as if the ship was telling him not to worry. It had always known how to survive. Years kept passing, and the mechanic grew older. He worked slower now, taking longer to fix even small engines. His hands ached and his back hurt, but he never stopped coming to the workshop. It wasn't just a place of work anymore. It was home. Sometimes during long, quiet nights he would sit in his chair, close his eyes, and listen to the hum of the ship. It calmed him. It reminded him that he had done something that truly mattered, something no one else could have imagined. He hadn't just repaired a machine. He had revived a lost soul. One morning, he didn't show up at the workshop as early as usual. The sun rose slowly, its light falling across the metal roof. Inside, the air was still. The tools lay neatly on the bench, everything exactly where he'd left it. The ship glowed faintly, sensing something different. Hours passed, but he didn't move. He sat in his chair, peaceful, as if resting after a long journey. The gentle hum of the ship filled the silence, softer this time, almost like a song. When the evening came, the sky turned orange and gold. The light inside the workshop began to shift on its own. The ship's glow grew brighter than it had in years, spreading warmth through the entire room. The walls shimmered, the air vibrated gently, and the space filled with a sense of calm that no words could describe. It was almost as if the ship was saying goodbye. Later that night, when the town was asleep, something strange happened. A bright light rose silently from the junkyard, higher and higher until it disappeared into the clouds. No one saw it except for a night guard who happened to glance up and thought he saw a star moving the wrong way. But the next morning, when people walked past the junkyard, they found the mechanic's workshop just as it always was, except the far corner where the strange old structure once stood was empty. The ground was untouched, clean and silent. The ship was gone. In town, people talked about it for a while. Some said it must have been stolen. Others said it was never real at all. But the few who truly knew the old man didn't ask questions. They just said he had finally found peace, and whatever that thing was, it had taken him home. Years later, the junkyard was rebuilt into a modern repair center. New people came, new machines arrived, and the world moved on. But every now and then, on quiet nights when the wind blew across the yard, workers claimed to hear a faint sound coming from the far corner, a soft, rhythmic hum, almost like a heartbeat under the ground. And sometimes, when the sky was clear, they said a single golden light appeared above the horizon, hovering silently for a few seconds before fading into the stars. No one ever found any proof, no photographs, no metal remains, but those who had known the mechanic believed that the ship had waited for him, all those years just to take him where it once came from. It didn't matter whether it was space or somewhere beyond human understanding. It mattered that it kept its promise. The story became a quiet legend in the town, passed from one person to another. People said there once lived a man who fixed broken things, even things that came from the stars. And though no one ever saw him again, they believed he was still out there somewhere. Among the stars he used to look at every night, still fixing, still helping, still giving life to what others had forgotten. And maybe, just maybe, When someone somewhere looks up at the night sky long enough, they might notice a faint golden shimmer moving slowly across the darkness. It doesn't blink like other stars. It glows softly like it's breathing. Those who believe the story say that's not a star at all. It's the ship, still flying, carrying the memory of the man who gave it purpose again. And if you listen closely on a quiet night when everything else is still, you might just hear a faint hum in the air, gentle and warm, like two old friends still talking to each other across the endless silence of the universe.